Hi, guys. Welcome back to your next day of our 10-day drop of information that will hopefully serve you in 2022. We have Dr. Amanda. I want to say Haynes, but I know I'm supposed to say Blonigan now.
Recently
Dr.
married.
Haynes, yeah, Dr. Blonigan, either way. One of my very best friends and a woman with a heart for so many things that matter. And I'm excited for her to share her evolution of not only how she's working with kids in the school districts. Most of her days are spent working with kids that definitely need people advocating for them and helping them along. And I'll let her explain a little bit more of how she picked up this passion she has. But she's going to be talking about the power of voice and how that's part of your health and well-being too. So welcome.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. So really, I just want to start with where I came from and know that, we all have our individual stories. So we've not always been this way. I haven't always listened to my body. I haven't always felt a need to talk and speak. And there's many things along my life that have led me to this journey. So wherever you're at on your journey, just be open to keep learning and keep questioning things. For me, I grew up in what I would consider like a meat and potato family of literally we ate meat and potatoes, but also like it felt like this is the normal American lifestyle. And, we don't eat the healthiest, but we don't eat unhealthy. And if we get sick, we go to the doctor, we take antibiotics, we did vaccines, all of these things that we felt were normal and never really questioned what we were doing.
They were common.
Yeah, they were common, not normal. So then I found myself in college, like for the first time ever, living on my own with friends, of course, in dorm situations, but didn't really know myself and didn't really know how to listen to my body and then know how to speak out. One thing we've talked about is I have an older brother and it always just felt like he was telling me to be quiet. So I didn't speak. And a lot of people can probably relate to that of being a younger sibling and holding a lot in, which led to college of drinking and, making poor decisions for my body. I remember in college, like if I got my period, I would literally take 2 Midol, 2 Tylenol, 2 Advil, and hope that one would make me feel better. And even my college roommate would be like, "What are you doing?" I'd be like, I just want to get rid of this. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know what was happening with my body. So
or that your period is very healthy to have.
Right. I just thought it was horrible. And
Right.
I'm still working through some of those thoughts of this is okay. I can accept this. Anyways, so ended up in chiropractic school. And that's really where meeting people that have walked a different path from me. Up until that point, I felt like I was surrounded by people that had very similar experiences. So it made everything feel normal. And then you get to chiropractic school and you're like, wow, you meet people that have never taken a drug before, never had a vaccine, been adjusted since birth, and think
maybe born at home.
Yeah. Think completely different than you. And you're like, how did I end up here?
Who are these weirdos?
Right. Yeah. It starts to challenge. I literally got my flu shot a week before chiropractic school. And then I showed up and I was like, oh,
nobody here got a flu shot. Okay.
Yeah. So it opened my eyes to a whole new world of wow, you can live differently. And
there's a whole group of people that do live differently.
Yeah. So that was kind of my earth-shattering moment of life happens in you. And also we've been programmed to think all these things are normal and maybe they're not normal. And then you start to have these experiences of, okay, sometimes, I don't know, you just have these experiences that you see the world differently than what you maybe thought you would, or what you were programmed to believe from, growing up or whatever it was.
I really resonate with that because I think I said in my book that if myself in college knew that I was going to have 2 babies at home and encapsulate my placenta, I wouldn't have known me. I would have been like, who is this whack job? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt in chiropractic school of all of a sudden, oh, my world is shifting. So the first time I went home from chiropractic school, it would have been Christmas break. I remember sitting at a table with all the people I grew up with, and they were just, talking how's life, blah, 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 blah. And someone asked like, oh, are you changing Atlanta or is Atlanta changing you? Meaning chiropractic school. And I was like, oh, Atlanta is for sure changing me. And they were like, oh, okay, like tell us more. And I literally, without context, just like blurt out like word vomit, like, I don't think I'm going to vaccinate my kids. And I remember like every person like turning and staring at me like deer in headlights, like, what is this girl talking about? And my brother, who has always had a very strong opinion, threw his arms up in the air and said, if you don't vaccinate your kids can't come around my kids. And at the time, that was hypothetical. He had no kids. I had no kids. But I remember just being like, oh, that didn't feel good. And okay, this is not a topic I can go blurt to the world. Like people don't relate to this, right?
It's a landmine conversation.
So
yep.
I kind of shrunk back in for a little bit. And that's when I just like, okay, I'm going to just, keep quiet about what I'm learning. I kept getting curious though, because when I went back to chiropractic school, I was like, okay, but there's something to this. It feels right within me. So I knew I had to keep trusting it, and I knew I had to keep learning
about holistic healing.
Yeah.
And maybe not doing the normal everything
every
down,
step. Yeah.
check off the list things. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So went back, still just kind of quiet in my voice, but definitely just absorbing all the information and leaning on people around me that were doing things differently. So.
And then I know you ended up going to Dr. Rubin's office for one of your externships.
Yep.
And you had a pretty life-changing scenario there. You want to share that?
Yeah. So Dr. Rubin is very skilled in pediatric chiropractic. So I learned a ton from him. As Dr. Lona mentioned, that is my passion, and I've always wanted to work with kiddos. I didn't exactly see how that would play out with chiropractic until I got into it and started learning more. So anyways, I'm at Dr. Rubin's. I'm an intern, so really still not feeling like the confident doctor yet, just learning. And Dr. Rubin was like, okay, like go in, start this exam for this kid, and I will come back in or step out when you're done with the interview and I'll come back in. So I go into this room and he sees a lot of kids with autism or labels or Down syndrome, all of these things, right? So I was prepared-ish as much as you can be as a student. But I walked into this room and there was a dad and mom sitting on the table, and then a 8-year-old kid banging his head on the wall. I was like, oh, okay. All right, we're going to do this. So I start talking to the parents and, go through all the normal health history questions. And in that conversation, the dad pulls out his phone and he plays a video of his 3-year-old son talking. And it was in that moment that I like look and I'm like, that there's no way this is the same child. Like he's talking, he's saying dada, he's, having conversations, and now he is nonverbal and he's banging his head on the wall. And I just remember as a student feeling so small in that situation of like, gosh, like if we knew, like, why are we holding back everything we know in our learning? Because this keeps happening more and more and more. If you look at the statistics for autism, it's like, no, these are increasing numbers. So why are we shrinking and playing small and not telling people? And then we watch families like this have to go through this situation. So I felt a lot of heartache.
Not telling them what?
Not telling them that, we have other choices. There are other choices. We don't have to vaccinate. We can trust our body and step into a more holistic health. Mm-hmm. And I feel that part of the lesson this child was teaching us is, there is like, he was definitely teaching this family a lesson in his existence here. And there are other ways to communicate and connect with other people that maybe isn't the verbal mouth that we've always done. Mm-hmm. So from that, I think my lifestyle choices and things like that, I started to lead through example, really. And then once I had the courage, now I feel like I can strongly come out and be more vocal with how I voice some of these things
in a respectful manner.
Yeah. And not, I've learned like, okay, you don't need to just blurt it out. People can't hear that. But it's when, you have these connected conversations and you really can understand like where they're coming from and where you're coming from, and delivering it with love. One of my favorite chiropractors, Katina Manning, we always joke that she is so rooted and knows exactly what she's trying to say from a place of love that she could literally be like, "You're ugly." And you'd be like, "Okay, tell me more." Like, she is just so.
Which she'd never say.
No, she would never say. But I say that because like, just because the words coming out of my mouth you don't agree with, if you know that I'm coming from a place of love and passion, and I'm sharing my experiences of like this child that I saw banging his head on the wall, like that's not normal. And if I can tell you about that, maybe we can find some common ground to relate on and have a real conversation.
Yeah. And the reason we're having this conversation about voice is we've definitely siloed, and we talked about this in some of the other interviews, like siloed physical health from mental, emotional health, from spiritual, or as Carr Sterner said, from consciousness health. And our voice is like this part of our system, this part of our energy field. We're given a voice and a way to communicate through voice for a reason. Some of us project too much through that chakra or through that energy body. We're loud, abrasive, not asked for our opinion, give it anyways. Others, we never give our opinion, or people desperately want to know you and you give them nothing, so it's shut down, it's closed off. For our health and well-being, we have to figure out and become curious, and Amanda's going to talk about that more, about our own energy dynamics. Hey, am I someone who shares? I'm someone who's always been way too loud, and I had to learn how to like reel that in. So I need to share less and realize more about when am I being asked? When can I lead with more grace than just projecting it out?
I've been the opposite in that, of like, I have just shut down, held it all in. And now I'm finally working through like, okay, when is appropriate to share? How do I share? And also like, what's filling me up versus sucking the energy out of me? Like sharing my voice on Facebook, not going to fill me up. But having some of these conversations is going to fill me up of like, okay, we're connecting, we're getting somewhere. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is like, you have your own reality and I have mine, and neither one is right or wrong. It's just through our experiences and what we've learned and how we feel. And if I can recognize that your story is true for you and my story is true for me, like I can still have a loving conversation with you. And
you can become curious about the other person.
Yeah. And then really tap into like what feels right. One of the lessons too is like, why do you keep coming back to something? Well, it feels right. So you keep learning more about it. If something doesn't sit with you, let it go. Like, don't keep stuffing that in, and don't take on other people's beliefs because it doesn't feel good. So get rid of it.
Yeah. A conversation that has kind of spun out of the last few that we've had in these chain of 10 conversations is also like in our families, we might at various paces be working on our health and well-being. So especially if there's a lot of moms listening to this, or people who see what's happening in their kids' health or their husband's health or whatever, sometimes we want to go and tell them what to do to change, or think that we know best. I know I do that. And I think that message of using curiosity when we're communicating is going to heal a lot of wounds between family members, instead of just projecting what I think you should do always. So if someone is not wanting to change or exhibiting behavior you don't like, maybe becoming curious and asking questions about why they keep doing things that way, that usually leads to the person having at least a better response, as well as potentially making some connections in their own mind if you are curiously asking them questions that maybe they haven't asked themselves.
Right. And I think it comes back to the innate, it comes from within us. So if you can sit within something and really dive through like, okay, why do I believe this for yourself? then once you're so grounded in what you believe, then it's easy to kind of guide the conversation, be curious in the other person and ask them questions of like, okay, how did you get there? Or, genuinely like, I want to understand where your thinking is here. I do believe that's the key, is like continuously being curious about the other person and coming from a good place within of asking yourself, like, does this feel right? There's so many things we've been programmed to believe, and some of those programs are so hard that we don't necessarily like, I don't want to not believe that.
Cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance, right?
Like-
We've seen those memes lately, but
Yeah, like I don't want to believe that vaccines can cause harm. And like, if you believe that so hard, it's going to be really hard in that moment to start to shift your mindset on it. And that's okay. You're not there yet. But as you continuously ask yourself questions and start to see more experiences, I think that opens your eyes and allows you to have the conversation of like, oh, maybe there are some harmful things happening in what we thought was good. And it's okay to shift our mindset and start to try new things.
Yes, I think, that conversation is such a dicey one these days, but happening more and more.
Yeah.
And what I'd say is most of us who do not consider ourselves anti-vax, for the record, we consider ourselves informed, and also we've been curious enough to start to look at other things. And as you are curious and like, gosh, for instance, I had a vaccine reaction when I was about 21 years old. I had no idea what that to even call it a vaccine reaction at the time. I just like, well, I had a seizure. I don't know what happened, But as I started to just ask the question, why do we inject stuff into our bloodstream all the time? And why do babies get so many of these? And did they always get this many? And who's responsible if something bad would happen? As you're curious and willing to just look and not necessarily have a preconceived notion of if you're right or wrong or whatnot, and keep doing that. Just because you made a decision once doesn't mean that you can't keep
changing. Yeah. Right. Like grant yourself the permission to grow and keep changing. And like you said, if you would have saw yourself in college thinking you were going to have 2 babies at home and all that, like you wouldn't be able to get there. But it's like those small steps of just, okay, I learned a little bit, take what I like, take what maybe doesn't serve me right now, get rid of it, and then keep evolving in life. I mean, that is, I think, the purpose of living, is to keep learning and keep trying new things.
Yes, totally. In Dr. Danny's interview, we said, like, once you know better, you do better. And I think that, again, is measurable only by yourself, right? So what Dr. Amanda would choose to do for herself or her family, and what I would choose to do myself, is measured against what is right for me and what is right for you. And so again, when we have that inner compass, now we don't need to react so much, because like she said earlier, inner truth can trump what external feedback is that you're getting. And that is part of health and well-being, because it's all connected. When we feel better because we're rooted within, we're certainly going to have better health and well-being physically too, because our energy system isn't chaotic.
Right. And even think about like when you are holding something in and you shrink down in, like that doesn't feel good. So if we are talking about health and well-being, like what do you need to open up? That's part of sharing your voice, is letting some of that out that you've been stuffing down in. It's not good to, everyone's felt that stress and the weight of your shoulders kind of like, oh, like something in my stomach doesn't feel right. And it's like, no, if we can learn to express, and that's so much like why there is so much power in sharing your voice, is like, no, we are meant to connect with other humans. We're meant to have these conversations. And
we're meant to question so that things can change if they need to change. Otherwise, we'd do the same thing that we did 300 years ago, over and over again.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Any last parting thoughts?
No, I think that sharing your voice does not mean you have to stand on a stage in front of hundreds or thousands or 10 people even. Sharing your voice is really about getting congruent in your body and confident and really grounded in what you believe, and then opening the door with curiosity of how can I share a little of what I've experienced, but so much of speaking your voice starts with just listening first.
Mhm.
And then when the time is right, you will be pushed into like, okay, I can't hold back this truth anymore. I have to start sharing it.
Mhm.
And at least that's been my experience and my journey of like, okay, I don't have to shrink down in. This is my turn to really start opening up and sharing what I believe.
Yes. A small step maybe for, I know, especially because this has come up in a few of the other ones too. There's a generation, and I'm going to label, there's a generation of women particularly who were not asked to share their voice. And they're, some of them are our moms and our grandmas and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And a small step that was given to my mom when she was becoming aware that she wasn't sharing her voice at all, and I wish she would have taken more action on this, was to just sing every day. And so you don't have to even use your voice for anyone other than yourself, and that may still be a baby step in the right direction. It may be a huge step in the right direction. Right. So again, everyone is in a different place with what will move you into feeling slightly uncomfortable, but in a good way, because you're doing something a little different. Yeah. All right. We're going to drop Amanda's contact in this email too. So you can find her on her Instagram, and she also has a podcast with her husband. And so if you want to hear more from her, there's where she'll be.
Thanks, guys.